Hi there. Welcome to Influencer or Influenced, Analyzing Stakeholders for Sustainability Projects. The purpose of this video is to give you some guidance on what to include in a stakeholder chapter for a sustainability improvement plan. Using the template for the Sustainability Improvement Plan that you can download from our website, there are 3 sections to this chapter: a stakeholder model, a stakeholder analysis, and a summary of the first stakeholder meeting. By the end of this session, you'll be able to identify and analyze those individuals and organizations that your project affects and those who can affect your project success by constructing stakeholder models, conducting a stakeholder analysis, and leading your first stakeholder meeting. Every chapter should start with an opening paragraph with the purpose of the chapter and an overview of what you'll be covering. This helps your reader know how much more there is in the chapter. In this chapter, for example, after several pages describing your stakeholder model, your reader may be surprised that there are several more pages doing a stakeholder analysis. And yet, a stakeholder analysis is a useful tool, very different from a stakeholder model, that helps with messaging and prioritizing different stakeholder groups. Providing a brief overview will prepare readers for the 3 sections of this chapter. The first part of your chapter, after the introduction, describes your stakeholder model. Remember that most people don't know much about stakeholder theory, so you may want to start with a brief description of stakeholder theory, and be sure to cite your sources. Then create a model with the stakeholders affected by or that can affect the project that best shows those relationships. Briefly describe the model before you show it. Make sure the model shows all the stakeholders affected by the project or who can affect the project. But don't include all the organization's stakeholders. That would include irrelevant information. Your stakeholders are busy people, and your information has to be thorough but focused. Make the model look professional and interesting. That usually means some kind of graphical representation of the stakeholders that showcases your abilities, since this project is one of the best pieces of evidence of what you can do for other companies. By the way, I had fun creating this one, but it may be a little too colorful and busy. One simple way of showing the relationships between stakeholders in your organization is by organizing them internal versus external. Another way is to categorize stakeholders as primary or secondary stakeholders. Primary stakeholders are directly affected or involved in the operations or the project. Secondary stakeholders play a more peripheral role, but can be very important if they are strong supporters or adversaries of the business or nonprofit. Another way of organizing them is functionally. This model is organized into 3 main functional areas: management, operations and supply chain, and sales. The actual stakeholder groups surround the functions. Finally, you might organize the stakeholders based on some theory. What theory is used here? Take a look. Other theories might include systems theory, life cycle analysis, communication or marketing theory, or some other theory that best describes the relationship of the stakeholders to the project and to each other. Be sure to briefly describe the theory before applying the theory graphically. By the way, the theory here is the triple bottom line. Bet you knew that. After you describe stakeholder theory, stakeholder models in general, and the type of stakeholder model you will be using, insert a figure with your stakeholder model. Then analyze the stakeholders. You don't have to use bullets, but you should break each stakeholder group out in separate short paragraphs and use font styles like bold font to help the reader follow your analysis, like the example at left. The second tool we're going to use in this video is a stakeholder analysis. This we will use to analyze how best to communicate with different stakeholder groups. This is actually a specific sustainability tool, not just an analysis of stakeholders. If you Google stakeholder models and stakeholder analysis and look at the images, you will find the examples of the two are very different. A stakeholder analysis takes a deeper look at the relationship that stakeholders have with your organization so that you can communicate effectively with them. There are several ways of doing that. This first one creates a two-dimensional matrix. That is, an analysis of two aspects or characteristics of your stakeholders on a continuum from most to least or highest to lowest. The two dimensions in this matrix are importance versus influence, ranging from unknown to significant influence and importance. The intersection of the two dimensions creates 4 quadrants, and you can create a more reasonable number of action plans to address the 4 groups rather than 16. Another two-dimensional matrix evaluates stakeholders' power versus interest along a continuum from low to high. This one is interesting because it also has suggested guidance for communicating with the stakeholders in each quadrant. High power, high interest stakeholders at upper right should be your highest priority for communication and coordination. Their decisions can make or break a project. The next quadrant is high power, low interest. You need to keep high power, low interest stakeholders satisfied because they can harass or stop your activities if their interest increases and they are dissatisfied. High interest, low power folks should be kept informed. They want transparency. They want to follow and support your green efforts. Finally, you can simply monitor those who are low interest and low power. Don't ignore them because that could backfire. This gives you a simple example of how the matrix works. The owner is obviously high power and high interest. Government has high power but low interest, unless you attract their attention, usually in a negative way. Employees may have lower power and lower interest in your green projects. And customers may have higher interest in your green projects but lower power to directly affect daily operations. These stakeholders may have entirely different places in your organization, and when their interest shifts, so can their power, through negative reactions or even sabotage. Here is another approach to understanding your stakeholders. Analyzing the position your stakeholders have towards a project or new direction that you're considering. This is a simple table, but because it's color-coded, it gives you an instant visual on the stakeholders that need special attention to get them on your side. It captures the reasons for each stakeholder's position and develops a plan for addressing the stakeholders who could keep your project or vision from succeeding. For the Sustainability Improvement Project template we are using, though, don't include the action plan in this chapter because there is an entire chapter on change management. Include your action plan in that chapter. Finally, this is an excellent visual of the impact that stakeholders have, which somewhat combines power and interest. This is a radar or spider chart. PowerPoint calls it a radar chart, while some other programs call it a spider chart. Both names seem appropriate. Each stakeholder is charted on a scale of 1 to 7 on the impact that they could have on a project or organization. How do you get the numbers? Well, there are several ways. If it's your workplace, you could estimate the level of impact based on your knowledge of the workplace. Or you could ask your key stakeholders what impact each group has. Or you could include a question in a survey on what impact various groups have. These analyses are not intended to have pinpoint accuracy. They are intended to add to your knowledge of the situation in which the organization has to operate so that you can make effective decisions. Finally, you should include a summary of the initial meeting that you have with your key stakeholders. This is an important first step to make sure you have the buy-in from your key stakeholders for your project. You should make sure they understand the process, discuss some sustainability issues of concern, identify their need, clarify what your project will be, define the scope, and get a commitment to meet again. This section should not be detailed minutes. However, if you think detailed minutes would be beneficial to add, include them as an appendix and summarize the meeting here. Now it's your turn. Start by outlining your stakeholders chapter. Create your stakeholder model. Develop your stakeholder analysis. Meet with your stakeholders and write a summary. Pull it all together with an opening paragraph and a closing paragraph. And then edit, edit, edit. So let's get started and enjoy the journey. This is a fun ride that we are starting.